friends, welcome to the inaugural episode of Hello Friends, which is the Mr. Robot in review. My name is Kyle. I am the founder of Project Potter. This is my first time ever creating anything on the internet, basically to share. So bear with me. I'm sure there's going to be some rookie mistakes. Probably using my hands too much, rambling on, things like that. But if you found this, you either know me already or you've heard of me through someone. And basically what this is a passion project. What I'm going to talk about basically for each episode of this series is the show Mr. Robot. And I fell in love with Mr. Robot from the pilot episode that we're going to talk about today, way back in 2015, which is pretty crazy that it's been 5 years already since that's happened, but Mr. Robot is my favorite show of all time, and I've been wanting to do something like this, create some content for quite a while. So again, my name is Kyle. I'm going to be your host. Maybe down the line we'll have some guests, I'm not sure, depends on kind of how it goes, but if nothing else, thank you for joining me, and happy to have you here. Basically, the show is going to be kind of different segments. Most of it is going to be a recap of each episode. I have seen the series all the way through, so this is a rewatch for me. This is probably my third time. The meat of the show is going to be called This Plot is an Illusion, which kind of play on words here from the slogan. What I'm going to do basically is be reviewing each episode scene by scene. I did take a lot of notes. Full disclosure, the pilot is 1 hour and 4 minutes. It took me 3 hours last night, 5/9. So if I was better prepared, then this would have been released on 5/9, but, tomato, tomato. So yeah, I'm going to be going through each scene. There's also going to be another segment where it's called Are You Seeing This Too? Basically where it's just my favorite shots or shots I thought stood out, whether it's the cinematography or just a nice shot that I liked. Mr. Robot is known for sort of its amazing cinematography and direction there. So we're going to have a segment like that. There's also going to be a White Rose Award, or someone's going to get a White Rose every episode, and that's just going to be the character that I found to be the best character in that episode. That could be the actor's performance, the impact they had on the episode, just kind of who I thought kind of stole the show there for each one. So I'm sure Rami's going to win a lot of these, but there's an amazing cast of characters in this show, so we'll kind of go from there. And then we're also going to have just a score overall out of 10 at the end of each episode. I know Mr. Robot is kind of the show that critically has gotten really high scores across the board. It's kind of hard to find a bad episode if there is one, but I'm going to be try to be as fair as I can. I do love this show. I'm a huge fanboy of it, so I'm going to try to be objective, but it's hard for me to find some flaws in this show. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it. So I did take extensive notes. I'm going to be reading off of an iPad, so I'm sure there's going to be a better way to do this in the future, but just be forewarned, there's going to be some beer. There's going to be some bad language in this, so if you have young kids, young Timmy, you tell him to go do his math homework, even though all the schools are closed right now. So I don't know how that's going to work, but also I know we aren't in the middle of a pandemic right now, so I hope everyone's staying safe, spending time with your loved ones when you can. I know it's tough right now, but yeah, just try and stay home and be safe as much as you can. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read off. I will try and not read directly from the iPad, but I'm just going to kind of go through each scene by scene, so anyone who's enjoyed the show, I hope you join me, and just kind of, even if it's just to get my take on it, it's just mostly a review and a ranking and just kind of a recap. I just want to go through and watch the series and kind of really pay attention to what makes this show so special, at least in my eyes. So This Plot is an Illusion. So the pilot episode, here we go. So it starts out with a black screen of Elliot talking to us, the audience, and then it cuts to a boardroom of the what he calls the 1%, arguing with each other. Now, at the time, we don't know what this is. Also, really quick full disclosure, I'm going to try not to do any future spoilers, so this is a rewatch for me, but anyone who's watching for the first time, welcome. You're in for a real buckle up, because it's going to be fun. But I'm going to try to avoid any spoilers for future reference as well. So basically, I'm going to go episode by episode, and whatever we know at that time, even if I know some other information from future episodes, I'm going to try and limit that or not speak to that. So, all right. So yeah, Elliot is talking to the audience, and then a couple of lines I put down here. He said, "The 1% of the 1% playing God without permission." Which I thought was an interesting line. And you see the scene here with a bunch of people in a boardroom. We don't know what this is yet. Just an interesting kind of take on Sam Esmail's world here. But basically, we then cut to the subway, where we have our first look at Hooded Elliot. And he's looking over at a man who is looking at Elliot, and he whispers something to another man, both in black coats. This will become a theme in this episode. And then Elliot's talking to the audience still. He says, "I should have gone to Angela's birthday party. Instead, I went to," and we get a flashback over to Ron's coffee, where kind of the opening scene of the show, or the first main scene. And we've got Ron's coffee here with Hooded Elliot in the back. And shout out to Rami Malek. He just crushes it with his awkward smiles and his stares. Probably be really creepy in real life, but for this show, he nails the introvert. And he has just so many subtle acting skills there that really shine in the show, and obviously the show made him big. So we have Elliot, Rami, who's down there staring at who we know is Ron, who comes into the shop here. I just put a note here. Rami kills it with his distant staring and awkward smirk. Just a small thing I liked. What happens is that Elliot goes over and sits with Ron. And the little detail I really liked, Elliot does not make eye contact for at least 4 or 5 seconds after he sits down with Ron. So normally, of course, you sit down with a stranger, you're going to look at them. With Elliot, he actually looks at the ground, he looks away. He's got kind of this smirk on his face. It's just, I mean, this will be a theme throughout the show, but just excellent acting from Rami here. To kind of play that introvert and that social distance. You can tell something's just a little bit off with his character. So basically, what's going to happen here, Elliot immediately reveals to the man that he did change his name from to Ron, when he bought his first Ron's Coffee Shop 6 years ago. Now he's got 17 total, with 8 more coming next quarter. And so this guy immediately is kind of wondering how Elliot knows so much about him, and sort of what's going on here. Elliot states that he likes coming here because of the Wi-Fi speed, and he said it's one of the few shops with a fiber connection and gigabit speed. He also reveals that he started intercepting the traffic on the network and noticed something strange, and Elliot reveals that's when he decided to hack Ron. He then reveals to Ron that he found 100 terabytes of child porn that Ron was serving to users. So this Ron, not such a good guy. You know, may look like a good guy, but might have a short name, the 3 letters. But turns out he's doing a whole bunch of child porn to people. So that's a no-go in this country. And so Elliot kind of gives him this wide-eyed look, and he says, "I understand what it's like to be different." And then he says, "I'm very different too," which I thought was a cool little touch from Rami. For future spoilers. So Elliot also then reveals that he doesn't know how to talk to people, and states his dad is the only one he could talk to. He reveals his dad then died of leukemia, but kind of brushes it off very quickly. And then he says that his dad got radiation from the company he worked at, but Elliot couldn't prove it, and now he's dead. And then he says, "But the company's fine though," which I thought was a nice little bit of humor there from Sam Esmail, the creator, of course. And so Ron states, he's kind of going on the defensive here, and he says that Elliot also broke the law by hacking him. And then this is where we get the Mr. Robot theme for the first time, and let me tell you, it's just as good the first time as it is all the other times. Anyone who's seen the show will know that theme. where it just kind of gets you going. It's just kind of a hype song. Really like futuristic techno kind of vibe. It's nice. But yep, Elliot starts to stand up and the Mr. Robot theme starts going. Elliot says that he usually hacks from his computer, but this time he wanted to do this in person because he wanted to work on his social anxiety, which I thought was pretty funny. And then Elliot reveals he made sure to include the location and the time with his anonymous tip. And as Elliot's walking away, you see the cop cars pull up there. Elliot starts to stand up and walk away. Ron then stands up with him and says he'll pay him. 2 minutes ago he said he wasn't going to pay him a thing because he was still going to get arrested. But now he's trying to beg for his life, kind of saying, I'll pay you whatever you got to do to make this go away, even though the cops are already there. And Elliot says, Elliot puts on his hood and he goes, that's the thing you don't know about me. I don't give a shit about money. Puts his hood on, walks out. The cops come in. Black screen, boom, Mr. Robot, first title card. It's beautiful. I'll include it here. Anyone who's seen the show has known that the Mr. Robot title cards, if you've seen kind of the image of all of them, it's amazing and it's perfect. And this one is just a black screen, but that Mr. Robot font, like this font right here, and the one on my shirt, of course, hello friend. It's awesome. It's retro, but it's great. Yep, so we get our first title card, and then we cut back to present time, which, you'll see from the show. You don't know what's real, what isn't, what time, what's going on, but we'll save that. But we go back to the subway, the opening shot here, with hooded Elliot, and Elliot's talking to the audience. He says, higher-ups don't like me, don't like someone with my powers. In 3 short minutes, I destroyed a man's business, life, existence. I deleted him, which I thought was kind of crazy because, of course, he's right. I mean, all he had to do was hack the guy, and suddenly, he's going to jail, and his whole career basically is gone. And that's kind of the power that Elliot has as the hacker, which is sort of crazy that we're living in that sort of day and age. But yeah, basically, like he said, in 3 minutes, he destroyed this man's life and erased him from existence, essentially. So that was a really good bit. And then we got Mr. Robot for the first time, played by Christian Slater, who, of course, does an excellent job throughout the series. But he's sitting across from Elliot to the left here. And then what do we have right across from Elliot but Sam Esmail himself, the creator, who is credited as Man on Train in this episode. And it's funny because he's got kind of a smirk on there, almost like he knows he's creating like a masterpiece already just from the pilot. Also, one thing I really like about Sam Esmail, now that the series is over, he said that he created the whole story, he wrote everything out, and then made the show. I don't know how often this happens in Hollywood, but it's much better to write everything out and have it come full circle, and kind of know the direction, and then film it, as opposed to kind of going along, or, let's say you make season 1 and it does well, and you do season 2, and then you can't keep up with season 3. Hopefully you know what I'm saying there, but basically Sam had a plan and he executes it to perfection. I mean, going back and looking through, there's a lot of callbacks or things I missed the first time that are really nice going through. So that's really nice. He's got a tight-knit story that he kind of tells right from the beginning. He knows exactly what story he wants to tell, so that's nice. But yeah, Sam is on the train, which is funny. I don't know if he's in other episodes. I'll have to look that up, but I know he's been in the pilot there from the Reddit feed and different searches there. So all right, so moving on here. Yep, so we got Mr. Robot, and he kind of leans over. He's to Elliot's left here, and he says, "Hey kiddo, what's happening?" Clearly talking to Elliot. Elliot looks really confused. He's like, "I don't know who this guy is. I don't know who is he talking to me? Is he talking to someone else? Is he a crazy person? Who knows?" Elliot looks confused. He doesn't say anything. And then Mr. Robot says one of his famous lines, and I'm sure you've seen it memed a million times now, especially with the pandemic going on, unfortunately. Mr. Robot says, "Exciting time in the world right now." And he goes, "Exciting time." He puts on his sunglasses and leans back. And that's all we get of Mr. Robot for now, but that's all you need to know. And so then we cut to hooded Elliot walking on the the sidewalk in a rainy New York City. Really nice shot here. One thing I noticed is that it's one of the rare shots where Elliot is center frame. I know Mr. Robot is kind of known for Elliot being on the right or the left of the frame here, not the center, like most shows are, and that's kind of what makes the aesthetic so nice. Unintentionally, I'm on the right-hand side here, just because I want you to see my Mr. Robot canvas that I've got. But a little kind of nice touch there that I didn't realize until just now. But yeah, that's what makes the show so special, is the cinematography. It's unlike anything you've ever seen, and I still stand by that. So, okay, so Elliot's walking there. A couple things I noticed here. There's just background signs, just a normal shot, but just an Irish pub, green and yellow sign, I thought really popped. A lot of scenes in this show really stick out for not really being anything crazy, but it always sticks out aesthetically to me. And I just love the style that Sam put there. So we're going to see a theme in that for sure. And so he walks into All Safe. Elliot's still talking to us, the audience, and he says, but I'm only a vigilante hacker by night. By day, I'm just a regular cybersecurity engineer, which, of course, you know, is a pretty similar profession to hacking, so that's not really a coincidence there. But Elliot starts smiling. Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. So before Elliot can get to his desk, his cubicle, Gideon Goddard, played by Michelle Gill, who's great, and I'm not going to say any more about that for future spoilers, but he calls him to the office. He says, Elliot, you know, like your boss is calling you the first day, and if you're late or some shit. Also, there might be some swearing on this podcast. Actually, there's going to be some swearing, so, you know, tell Timmy to go do the rest of his math homework, you know? Algebra, useless. Anyway, basically what happens is that Gideon calls him into the office. Elliot starts walking over there, and he sees Angela, played by Portia Doubleday, who's marvelous in this role. They're kind of arguing, and they're talking about this attack that went on last night. And they say, you know, this client's servers were attacked. Of course, they're a cybersecurity team, so that's not good. I mean, if they're hired to protect, you know, their cybersecurity and it's getting breached, then they're not doing a very good job. And what's the value there in that company? We don't know who this client is at the moment. We'll find that out in a bit. But they're just saying, you know, there's been lots of attacks this week, and there's another attack, and it's no good. Elliot gets a little excitement from this because it seems like it's not just your standard hack. So he starts smiling at the computer and says, "This is awesome," which I thought was really funny. And Gideon's like, "This is awesome. This is terrible. I don't like. What are you talking about?" And so Gideon notes the client networks have been attacked every week, which I mentioned, and then they mentioned a meeting with the client today. And then at the time, the audience, of course, us, we don't know who that client is. We'll find that out in just a bit. So Angela and Elliot leave Gideon's office, and then we enter another flashback of Elliot about to meet up with Angela at a bar for her birthday party last night, where it shows Elliot going to the door, but never walking in. This is when we cut back to present time, and Ollie comes over, Angela's boyfriend, Ollie Parker. And he is played by Ben Rappaport. Ben's a great actor. Ollie, I don't think, is a very loved character in this show, but that's okay. It's not his fault. He does great as Ollie. But basically he starts giving Angela a hard time, says he can't have that kind of negativity in his life. Kind of a dick move by Ollie there, because clearly Angela and Elliot have known each other, as we find out, since childhood, and clearly Elliot's got some comfort issues, and Ollie's not really understanding of that. But we'll go into that more later. So they get in a little fight, but it's fine. And then we have a brief shot of Elliot walking with some fast food, some fries, maybe some McDonald's, some Burger King. I didn't write down what it was. Good choices, but McDonald's king. So don't get it twisted there. And then we cut to Elliot's therapy session with Krista Gordon, who is played by the lovely Gloria Rubin. And obviously she plays a larger role going forward. Again, trying not to spoil too many things while also alluding to that. But yeah, she's not going anywhere anytime soon. But she's an interesting character because as you'll find out, she's got her own issues that Elliot's gonna dig into there. But she is Elliot's therapist, and her job is to kind of make progress on Elliot as a whole and some of the issues that he has there. So Elliot's talking again to the audience, and Elliot reveals he was forced here. He didn't voluntarily go to therapy, and that he notes that he's already hacked Krista, his therapist, and it was easy. There's a line in here that he says that I really like. He says, although she's a psychologist, she's really bad at reading people, and I'm really good at reading people, which is ironic. And he goes, my secret, I look for the worst in those people, which is an interesting tidbit. Krista he then states that Krista's been going through a divorce, and she's been dating, quote, losers on eHarmony ever since. eHarmony, let's not shit on eHarmony here, okay? It brings people together through love, okay? So, Sam Esmail may not be a big fan of eHarmony, but it's not all bad. I haven't used it, but I know people who have. Anyway, the current partner for Krista is a guy named Michael Hansen. And Michael Hansen, Elliot states that there's something about him that bugs him. He's got no Facebook, no LinkedIn, and that's scratching a part of his mind again, which kind of hints that he's had this issue, or the hacker side of him is kind of coming up again. And then he says, but I'll hack him soon enough, I always do, which is kind of creepy, but also kind of like, all right, Elliot, we'll get the guy. Elliot's kind of he's a vigilante hacker, and although some of his methods are kind of creepy, he plays the hero in a lot of ways and the protagonist, so you're kind of rooting for Elliot, even though he is kind of exposing people, but you'll see he kind of does it for good, and he kind of picks on the shitty people, or the cheaters and all that, but we'll get into that in just a bit. And so Krista says, I know you're not yelling like before, which is good, but I can tell you're still holding on to it. So clearly there's been some ongoing issues here. And then that's when we get the first, fuck society. That's what Elliot says. He says, fuck society. Again, hopefully Jimmy's not listening. So Krista mentions Elliot is angry at everything and says there's pain underneath. That's where our work needs to go. So clearly this has been an ongoing issue, and she can tell there's a deeper issue rooted there. And then she asks Elliot, what is it about society that disappoints you? And then we get this great montage, starting off with Steve Jobs. And a couple quotes I wrote down here. Elliot says, what disappoints me about society, he says, is it that we collectively thought Steve Jobs was a great man, even though he made billions off the backs of children. And then we cut to some children working in factories. These actors didn't look super young to me, but I think the idea was that younger kids have been working to manufacture the iPhone and all that stuff. It's the thought that counts. And then he says, or maybe it's that we feel that all of our heroes are counterfeit. And there's a shot to Lance Armstrong, Bill Cosby, who's a piece of shit, and then Tom Brady. And as a Patriots fan, I can say that one hurts Sam, because he may or may not have cheated, but still the greatest quarterback ever. We're not going to go into that, but I thought it was kind of funny that they had a Tom Brady in the pilot of Mr. Robot. And then he says the world is one big hoax. And then he says, or maybe it's because we voted for this. And he goes, not with our rigged elections, but with our things, our property, our money. I'm not saying anything new. We all know why. And he says, because we want to be sedated. He says, because it's painful not to pretend, because we're cowards. He's kind of getting defensive. And then it turns out this is all just in Elliot's head. Great direction here. It cuts back to Krista, and she goes, Elliot, you're not saying anything. So all of this that we thought was real, just in Elliot's head, or just telling us, the audience. In reality, he's not actually saying anything to Krista. I thought that was a really good point by Sam Esmail. Elliot then reveals to Krista he knows what it's like to be alone, and he's just trying to protect him. Elliot reveals that he knows Krista knows what it's like to be alone, and she's just trying to protect him And then she says, "How do you know I know what it's like to be alone?" And he found out from her hacked emails, and so he's kind of caught red-handed there. And he goes, and then she goes, "It's okay, we can just move on," which I thought was kind of funny. But whether she knows or not, she can tell something's wrong with Elliot. But she kind of sweeps that one under the rug there. And then Krista asks Elliot if he went to Angela's birthday party last night. So then we get another flashback to the bar. Elliot's going to the bar. He looks in, and Angela and Ollie are not making out, but kind of, in that flirty phase where they're kind of will they, won't they? Except they definitely have been. So, it's just a couple, and anyone who's been a third wheel, especially if Elliot has feelings for Angela, romantic or not, as we'll find out. He doesn't really want to be a third wheel. He doesn't want to be there because he knows Ollie's just going to take up the time. So he gets to the door, and then he sees that, and he kind of just bolts. But he lies to Krista, and he says, I had a really good time. He says, "I got a girl's number." And she's like, "Oh, really?" And then it turns out that he was just completely lying the whole time. And we get that montage of Elliot walking away, so we know it's a lie, and he didn't actually go. He did just walk away and go home there. And then Krista says, "You're hiding again, Elliot. When you hide, your delusions come back." And so this is a big point here. And she says, "Let's talk about the men in black you're seeing. Are they still here?" And no, Will Smith doesn't show up in Mr. Robot, unfortunately. Sam, kind of a mistake there. Should have had Will Smith show up as a Men in Black. But these are referred to as the Men in Black, which we'll see later. And even though he's been seeing them all episode and he knows and the audience sees, he says, "No, they're not, and the meds you gave me are working." And he's clearly not taking the meds. So he's, again, lying to his therapist, which, not a great idea. But Ollie then approaches Elliot at the office, and he's kind of confronting him about their awkward situations, which of course is awkward, but basically he says, "I know you're close with Angela, and I'm close with Angela, and I see a future with Angela, and I want us to be close. I don't want this, this division between us." And so Elliot, really good acting by Rami here, where he's pretty awkward, and there's another amazing score that comes up. I didn't write down the song name, but as Ollie's talking, Elliot kind of zones him out, and then Elliot talks to us, the audience, about how he hacked Ollie, and he said he was the easiest one to hack. His password was 1234567, which I thought was really funny. And then he finds out Ollie is actually cheating on Angela with a girl named Stella B, which sucks, because Ollie seems like a good guy, but he's just a piece of shit who's another cheater, apparently. But then he says, Ollie's not a bad guy. He said he's too dumb to be bad, which is kind of like, he might be dumb, but he's still a cheater, so, but Elliot's not sure if he should tell Angela or not. And then we enter E-Corp, which is a great moment in the pilot. Elliot calls it a conglomerate of evil, which is amazing. And basically Gideon is showing E-Corp, who is the client we were talking about earlier. He's showing them around the office, an office tour. And Terry Colby comes over to Elliot's desk, and he's not really paying attention to Elliot, but Elliot's talking to the audience, and he says, "Terry Colby is the CEO, or CTO, excuse me." And he said but he's a moron, and he owns a BlackBerry still. And they cut to his BlackBerry, which I thought was funny. And then we get some time where we are introduced to maybe my favorite character of the show, Tyrell Wellick. And he, right now, is the senior VP of technology at EvoCorp. And he talks to Elliot. The whole group kind of moves on, and then for whatever reason, Tyrell stops with Elliot, and they talk about, "Oh yeah, I don't know what you're thinking, an executive running Linux." And Elliot has the thought right before, and then Tyrell is like, "I know, executive running Linux." It's a cute moment there. And then Tyrell says he's just the senior VP of technology at the time. And Elliot goes, "Oh, I'm just a tech." And he goes, "Oh, don't be so modest." And then we get the first, Tyrell walks away, and we get the first bonsoir Elliot. And someone who's seen the show, that gave me goosebumps because of what's to come. But I won't say any more about that. But anyway, he walks away. And then we get another shot of Elliot talking to the audience. He says, "Sometimes I dream of saving the world from the invisible hand." And I thought that was just a really cool quote. And then Elliot gets home. He breaks down crying. He reveals to the audience he's been crying every 2 weeks now. And then he says, "What do normal people do when they get this sad?" And there's that shot of Elliot kind of crying next to his dresser and breaking down. Really good acting by Rami. It's really sad. You can tell he's broken up. Even if he's acting kind of normal or okay at work, he's clearly a little shaken up on the inside. And so this is when Elliot tells us that he's been doing morphine and limiting himself to 30 milligrams a day and checks every pill for purity, which don't know how he does that, but that's something he does. And then we get our first shot of Shayla, who comes in. And she needs to give him drugs to help his withdrawals. And I didn't write down the name of the drug. I think it's Oxy something. People who know more about that stuff will correct me on that. But basically he takes morphine, and then if he needs to, he takes those drugs to kind of handle the withdrawals. Which isn't... You shouldn't be taking drugs to counter drugs, because that's just a bad idea. Drugs are bad. Okay, so stay off them. Unless it's weed, that's fine. But... hard drugs, no. Anyway, where were we here? So Shayla and Elliot, they're kind of hanging out, and Shayla comes over, and then she says, "Oh, you want to do this Molly?" And Elliot goes, and then it's a cut to a naked Shayla and Elliot, who just probably slept together. It's inferred that they slept together because she's naked on his bed, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they just passed out. But anyway, there's a funny line where Elliot says to the audience, "Don't ever make decisions when you're on morphine," which I thought was good. And he's kind of just, I think I don't know if he's smoking a blunt or a cigarette. I don't remember. Probably a blunt. That's some weed for those kids little Jimmy that doesn't know out there. Learned about weed today. So, yep, so that's happening. And then Elliot gets an Instagram check-in for Krista, which I don't know if that's really a notification or if he just checked that or if he's hacked into her account. I don't know how that works. But basically, he gets a message that Krista is at a restaurant with Michael named Laura Lodi. And so he's kind of done with Shayla, and he kind of realizes his mistake. So what he does is gets out of bed, puts his head on, and he goes down the street to a restaurant, to that restaurant, Laura Lodi. And he sits across really creepily from the restaurant there, and of course the couple is in the window seat, so he can just see them from the street, which is convenient. But then he also sees the men in black again. They sit down at a table, and they're always looking at Elliot or looking at the camera when we see the men in black. And so they're hanging out there. Basically, Michael and Krista come out from their date, and the night is over, and Krista's going to the right, and Michael's going to the left, and Michael gets a cab. He's playing it all cool, because he thinks he's playing all the strings over here, because Elliot hasn't gotten to him yet. He's in for some shit, let me tell you that. And so Michael gets in the cab. Elliot's looking at the cab. He gets the cab number. He calls the cab company. And he says, "Oh yeah, I just left my keys in your cab, and then this is the cab number." And I guess they tell him what address or what destination it's going to, so that they can meet them there. I mean, I'm assuming that, I don't know if this happens a lot. I would kind of assume that the cab would go to their location, but I guess it makes sense that they would go to the destination. But that's how he finds out where Michael lives. So basically what he does is goes and confronts Michael in person, and Michael's being a real asshole to his dog. He's kind of yelling at his dog to pee when his dog is clearly scared shitless, and he's probably been an abusive dog owner. And so Elliot's kind of looking at him. He kind of knows what character he is outside of just how he dates Krista. And so this is when Elliot goes up and he asks Michael, "Hey, can I call my mom because my phone is dead?" And kind of a weird request, but Michael's like, okay. So he gives him the phone. Elliot calls his own phone that's in his back pocket, that's not actually dead, with Michael's number to get his number. And then he deletes his number from the dialed calls list, which I'm guessing you could probably get away with. I think there's a little bit of a stretch there that Sam looks. I mean, I guess you're not looking for that, but when a stranger asks for your phone, if they're doing anything other than dialing, giving it right back, it's kind of weird. But it's pulled off well enough where I can see how that would happen in real life. So yeah, he deletes it so that he doesn't know that he called his own number. And then now he's got his number. Elliot's got Michael's number in his back pocket. And then this is where Angela calls him. Now it's apparently 3 a.m. And Angela calls him and says E-Corp, which we now know is the client, their servers were attacked again, but it's bad this time. And he says, well, call Lloyd. Lloyd's on call. Lloyd is already in the office, and she goes, no, you got to get here. And then she says, Elliot takes an hour to get there. And then she says, in that hour that you took to get here, she says, Evil Corp lost $13 million in revenue, which I thought was pretty crazy. And so then we have a scene where it's Lloyd, Angela, Gideon, and Elliot, and they're talking about the hack. And Elliot states it's coming from all over the world. I think he says U.S. and Finland. And then they're talking about, I think it's a rootkit, they call it. And Angela said, well, what's a rootkit? Because she's still new and she doesn't know. And then Lloyd says, it's like a crazy serial rapist with a very big dick. Which I thought was a great line. And they're like, Jesus, Lloyd. Like, come on, man. And then basically what they do is they say a rootkit is just a malicious code that wipes everything out or gives them control to the server. Something I'm not super technical, so I don't know exactly what it is, but it's basically just a virus. And then they said the solution is just to take everything offline because that's all they can do right now. And so then Gideon, line I really liked, he calls someone, and then he says, we're going to need the jet. And then they get on a jet, which is pretty cool. So Gideon and Elliot, I don't think Angela comes with them, but Gideon and Elliot arrive at like a server room, basically. They must have gone to like their headquarters where the server is, because that would help or something. And Elliot states he needs to redirect the traffic by switching the DNS settings. Now, I kind of work tech support for my job, so I got that a little bit, but I don't know the real logistics. Anyone who's super technical, I'm sure, can look up or correct me, but I'm not here to discuss the technicalities or the accuracies, just kind of the overall plot here. Basically, he's got to redirect it before it hits the back server. And so there's some tense moments, and Gideon starts freaking out, but Elliot is able to stop it right before and restore everything, and then he's looking for a note. He says every hacker is looking for attention, and then he finds the F Society note, and he says this was created by me, which kind of confused me because I didn't really remember. But basically, he's about to delete it, and he doesn't delete it. And he says, why can't I delete this? Or why don't I want to delete this? And then he kind of struggles with it internally, and then he just redirects it so that only he can control it. And I was like, oh, that's not good. That's a very bad sign in the pilot. He should just deleted it if he was doing his job right. So basically, he doesn't want to get rid of it, and he holds on to it without letting anyone know. And so they're on the plane back, which I thought was a really cool scene. That'll be one of the shots I liked. Gideon and Elliot sitting across from each other, and Gideon reveals that he's gay. And I thought it was really funny because Elliot just says, thanks. And I was like, not the best way to respond to that, but it was a little bit of dark humor there. And then Gideon reveals that Evil Corp is 80% of AllSafe's business. And he says they're thinking about walking after the hack, and he doesn't blame them or the attack. And then Gideon reveals that feels like he can talk to Elliot more than the others anyway, which is kind of a compliment. But it's a nice little bonding moment, but also he's kind of like, you're better than the rest of these shit bums, so guess I'll talk to you. And Elliot obviously is kind of awkward with social interaction, so he doesn't really know how to respond to that. Anyway, we cut alone to Elliot on the subway, and this time he's completely alone on the subway, no one else is there. And then Mr. Robot stumbles in again, and he sits directly across from Elliot, and he says, I think you should come with me, but only if you didn't delete it. And that's what he says. And then he says, if you did delete it, we got nothing to talk about. But if you didn't delete it, you should come with me. And he gets off the train, and Elliot's kind of wondering what the hell's going on. And then it gives that warning that the doors are going to close, and at the last second he's he sneaks by and gets to the door. And this is where Elliot and Mr. Robot sit kind of side by side, back to back, but kind of sideways on the bench. And then this is when Mr. Robot tells a story of his dad when he was little, how he was stealing money. I don't know if it was money laundering, but basically he said everyone gets paid what they're worth, but it's just whether or not you get caught stealing or not. And so he was stealing money from either a company or laundering money, I'm not sure, for the longest time. And he's like, I always respected him. I thought that was cool. And then one day he got caught and he died in prison. And he's like, when he died, my respect for him died. Mr. Robot says that about his father. So, and then a really cool line here that's going to come into play way later. He says, he was in prison just like you are now, Elliot. And then he says, and I'm going to break you out. And that's an awesome line for anyone who's seen the series already. So Mr. Robot leads Elliot through the boardwalk by the Ferris wheel, down a long alleyway. People will know this if they've seen the show. And then into the old arcade, which is the hideout for F Society, which we find out. And then this is when Mr. Robot tells Elliot that was a test. The hack was a test, and that's how he trusts people. Basically, we get there. That's how he finds the best hackers. And then he's kind of going through. There's Darlene. There's all the different characters there. We're not introduced to them just yet. And then it kind of cuts back to Elliot with his hood up, walking frantically through New York City. And he's kind of wondering whether last night was real, what happened, kind of questioning his own sanity. And then he says, I know I'm talking to an imaginary person, but I created you, but I didn't create this, which I thought was interesting. And then Elliot goes and he's walking to his apartment where he meets Angela, who's been waiting on his stoop, where she says you live in a really bad neighborhood, you know that? And he's like, yeah, of course I know that, obviously. And then she's like, hey, I've got Back to the Future 2. You want to go smoke some weed and go get high and watch some Back to the Future 2? And he's like, that sounds great. Then we get upstairs and Shayla's still naked on the bed, passed out. And Angela's like, I'm not about this scene right now. So Angela gets really awkward and she's like, oh, I'm gonna leave. We can do a movie night another night. And Elliot's kind of pissed because he didn't want Shayla there. He thought he was gonna finally get some time to spend with Angela, but Shayla kind of ruined everything. So Angela leaves, and then we get a funny scene of Elliot kind of standing above Shayla, who's still passed out. She's kind of wondering what time it is, and Elliot just goes, Shayla, leave. And that's all there is to that. So Elliot starts researching Mr. Robot, F Society on his computer. He can't find any trace of them. The only thing he finds is that F Society used to be Fun Society, an amusement park, and the owner was shot and killed a year ago after owning it for 13 years. So that's interesting. And then Elliot goes to the F Society, or the amusement park again, and he sees Darlene at the entrance. And then she asks him for access to the root directory, and she states that she wrote the rootkit and she just needs Terry Colby's IP address to kind of finish it. And Elliot seems confused by that, and she calls him a dickhead. And then Mr. Robot comes in the background, and Elliot's like, she just called me a dickhead, and he goes, yeah, that's Darlene. And I'm like, that's fair, because shout out to Carly Chaikin, who plays an amazing Darlene. So then Mr. Robot asks Elliot if he likes Ferris wheels, and they get on the Ferris wheel. This is one of my favorite scenes, just because it's so cool, and every time the cart comes down and on the back of Elliot, and it looks like it's going to smash into their cart, it always scares me, even though I know it's not going to hit. That's really good cinematography there from Sam. And so Mr. Robot starts telling about the whole plan here. He says, look, you're here because you sense something wrong with the world, something you can't explain, but you know it controls you and everyone you care about. Elliot's like, what are you talking about? And then he tells him about the plan to hack, I don't know if it's the government, but it's basically the conglomerate. He wants to hack them where they control, he said, 70% of the student debt. And he says, basically they would hack them, and he said it would be the single biggest incident of wealth redistribution in history. Basically they would format the servers and wipe out all the debt and he said digital records would be expunged, and then he said it would be impossible to update any paper records, which makes sense because, as you know, pretty much everything is digital these days. So if something like that were to happen, it would be crazy. Basically, what he wants to do, he said, if we can hack this server here, you're going to erase debt for everyone. And as someone who pays student loans, that would be amazing if that would happen. And if they can't prove that we owe them, then, you know, good for them. So, and so that's kind of put into place here. Mr. Robot just says you have to enter Terry Colby, the CTO of Evil Corp. You have to enter his IP address, and it will frame him for the attack that F Society put forward there. And then we get an amazing shot or amazing score for Neil Diamond's "If You Go Away," and this is an awesome sequence. And then it shows Elliot walking home, and he starts looking up articles on student debt and how degrading it is. And then he sees the Men in Black again the next day when he's going to work. And then we have the meeting with Evil Corp, Allstate, and the FBI. And I'm sorry, I meant to mention this earlier. When Mr. Robot's talking to Elliot on the Ferris wheel, he says the FBI is going to show up at Allstate tomorrow. He's like, you just need to switch the files and have Terry Colby's IP address entered so that he's blamed for the hack. And Elliot's kind of unsure of this at the time, but that'll change in just a bit. So the meeting with Evil Corp, Allsafe, and the FBI. Terry Colby's in a good mood. He's in the meeting, and he says, Elliot, no, congratulations on stopping the hack. That was a really bad one, and it sounds like you got to it pretty well. And then Angela starts kind of going in the report. She says, at 2:07 a.m. Friday morning, this is when we noticed the attacks. And then Terry Colby says, well, wouldn't that be Saturday morning? And Angela goes, well, yeah, technically it would be Saturday morning. And he goes, well, that's why we're here, Angela, for the technicals. And he's just being a dick to Angela. And so he's just kind of dismissive of Angela and rude to Angela from the get-go. And then he says something to his guy, whispers it. Gideon gets Angela escorted. And then Elliot basically is left to take over. And then Terry Colby, just being an asshole here, he's like, who did this? Who figured out, this can't be hard to tell me who did this hack. Clearly it's more complicated than that, but he's just kind of being abrasive there. So that kind of happens, and Elliot helps there, but he's mad that Angela got kicked out. So 2 weeks go by, but basically, Terry getting mad at Angela kicking her out for no reason is kind of the reason why Elliot says, no, actually, screw this guy. I'm going to give you the files with Terry Colby's IP address and blame him. So he was kind of iffy on whether he should blame Terry Colby before, but then he just needed to see that Terry Colby was not a very good person, and that gave Elliot the only thing he needed to kind of blame him for that. And so 2 weeks go by. Elliot doesn't see anything about any records or arrest records or anything like that, and or any contact from Mr. Robot. He's kind of wondering, is this the whole thing a hoax? What's going on here? And so he's like, I just need to do what I do best. And so he hacks Michael's account again, Krista's partner, and he states what he wouldn't give to be normal. And he calls it the bubble of reality of the naive, he calls it, which I thought was nice, where he's just looking at pictures of Angela, like with Ollie just being normal. And so Elliot finds out he's finally able to hack Michael. He finds out that he's not using Michael Hansen is not his real name. He finds out that he's cheated on his wife with 7 different women, and that he confronts Michael in person. So he goes up to Michael when he's shopping with his wife, and he tells Michael that he needs to break up with Krista tonight and tell her everything. And he says, if you don't do this, I'm going to release all the information, basically. And so Michael ends up telling Krista. And then he says, I'm going to need one more thing. And he takes his dog, because Michael's being a piece of shit to his dog. And so it's funny, because I'm going to need one more thing. And then he goes home, and Elliot's got his dog at home, which is nice. And so then it cuts to Elliot being at home, writing on a Sharpie. Everyone he's hacked, basically, he makes a record of it, copies the files to a disk, and then puts them in a binder, and then deletes the files from his computer. And then there's a line here he says, where I never want to be right about the hacks, but people always find a way to disappoint, which I thought was interesting. And then he says, Michael Hansen gets filed away with all the others, forever buried in my digital cemetery, which was kind of eerie but nice. And then Elliot goes to see Krista for his therapy, and it's clear that she's been told, she's zoning out and she's devastated. And then she's just kind of out of it. So Elliot kind of knows that he did tell her. And then Elliot and Angela are back at the Allstate office. And Angela asks Elliot, don't fight my battles for me. She says, if I'm losing, just let me lose. And he's kind of, didn't think he was doing anything wrong, but he's like, okay, I'll back off. And then everyone in the office kind of stands up. And there's a shot of Gideon turning up the TV. Everyone's like in shock. It looks like they're looking at Angela and Elliot because he goes in for the hug, which is a big moment because he doesn't like being touched at all, which they hit on a couple times during the pilot. But they go in for a hug. Elliot initiates the hug, and then it looks like everyone's looking at them. Wide shot pans out to it's the TV. And there's the news of Terry Colby being arrested. And after about 2 weeks, Elliot is ecstatic because it looks like the IP trick worked. They blamed him for the hack, and the FBI finally decrypted it. And Terry Colby is the one who's now in trouble for the hack there. And so Elliot goes to Times Square. He's like, I can't believe this is happening. And then he throws his hands up. The iconic, an iconic shot. Now, I didn't know this was in the pilot, so I was really excited about that. And I'll put that in the shots I liked at the end. But he goes in front of Times Square. Terry Colby arrested and throws his hands up. And right after that, great direction here, the men in black are surrounding Elliot. And they were like, sir, you need to get in the car. And so they finally get to Elliot. They put him in the car. We don't know where he's going. Turns out they're going to Evil Corp. There's an awesome scene in the elevator where it's Elliot and 4 of the guys in black, and they're all kind of just squishing the elevator together. And then the elevator opens, and it's a blurry hallway. And you see kind of the people arguing in the distance. And Elliot goes down the hallway, and everything's blurry. And then he kind of looks stunned at everyone, and every face is blurry until it focuses on Tyrell Wellick's face, which shows up blurry, center of the frame, and then it gets very clear. And that's when Tyrell Wellick says, Bonsoir, Elliot. And the last scene of the shot is Elliot saying, please tell me you're seeing this too. And then it cuts to the credits. And what a pilot. Like I said, it's an hour and 4 minutes, but it took me 3 hours to do the notes. I'm so glad that I did because, again, this pilot had me hooked immediately. It's really a perfect hour of television, and there's everything you could want in there: character development, twists and turns, suspense, tension. It's a perfect hour of TV, I think, in my mind. And it really just sets up the whole universe that Sam Esmail builds, and it only gets better from here. But yeah, that's the pilot. And so basically, a couple things here. So I'm going to give it an overall score. This first one, let's go to the score. 10 out of 10. I just think this is a masterpiece of television. Like I said, a perfect hour. It does a great job of laying down the foundation for the world, the different characters. Each character has their moment. You get to see the different things that make Elliot tick, the things that are wrong with him. You get insight to a bunch of different characters, and it really does just a masterful job of storytelling. And so I think this is a 10 out of 10. I think it's a perfect score, especially for a pilot episode. I'm sure people have seen many pilots that, everyone's seen the show where it takes 3 or 4 episodes at least to get into the show. This show starts right off the bat. If you don't like the show after this episode, then I don't think you're going to like the show. Although you should keep watching it. So I think it's perfect. And in the White Rose Award, this is the first one, but of course it's got to go to Rami Malek as Elliot Alderson. He just kills it. His acting is incredible in this, and again, he's probably going to win a lot of these White Rose Awards, but I think he's just got the most. He's got the most screen time, but he also just does the most with that time between his little actions, his dialogue. He is the star of the show in many ways, but he just shines and he sets the foundation here. So yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I am going to be doing an episode a week, so hopefully every Saturday. I was hoping to release this on 5/9 yesterday. Happy Mother's Day to all those mothers out there today, but I didn't things happened and I didn't record this in time. But going forward, it should be one episode a week. So every Saturday, hopefully, I'm going to do an episode. Same thing. I'm going to go kind of scene by scene and review that, give my score on it. Eventually, we'll kind of rank the best episodes. But yeah, it's just a Mr. Robot in review. If this goes well, I'm probably going to do some other things like Star Wars in review, maybe other things I like. The MCU probably. Those are a little bit different because those are longer. I mean, it took me 3 hours to do notes on an hour-long episode. So we'll see what time permits there. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, this is my first video I've ever produced and put in the wild there. So probably going to have a Patreon. If you guys want to support that, great. If not, you just want to see this on YouTube. Again, I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure there's many things that I could do better. But any kind comments, of course, are appreciated. And if you like the content, please like, subscribe. Ring that bell notification. I feel like I'm just repeating everything I've seen from every YouTube channel I watch. But yeah, until next time, bonsoir.